come to a short introduction or explanation of getting a doctoral degree in Germany and then also at FAU. Getting a doctoral degree in Germany or German-speaking countries is quite different from how to get a degree in Anglo-Saxon countries, so we will have to discuss that. Here's the agenda. What is the doctor title? Why would you want to get one? And also then, of course, how do you actually get there once you've decided that this is what you want to do? So formally, a doctor title is a prestigious academic title that you are awarded if you submit noteworthy scientific research, non-trivial scientific research in a written form, the so-called dissertation, to some accredited institution, meaning FAU. You submit a written piece, 200 pages perhaps, that will then, if it's done properly, get accepted as a dissertation to give you that title. The actual titles vary. It's a Doctor of Engineering in the engineering faculty of FAU, and in the natural science it's a Dr. Rea Nat and so forth. There are also Ph.Ds. We'll talk about that later. So before I explain how to get there, you need to think about why do you actually want it. And don't just jump into it. You need to have a reason, in my opinion. And here the cartoon asks, is there more to life than discovering, uncovering, unlocking the mysteries of the universe? That's, of course, what science or research is about, and ideally, that's the best motivation for you as well. Trying to understand, wanting to solve really hard problems. Ideally, such problems that bring society forward. So there needs to be curiosity, interest in a particular topic that should drive you. Also, and completely valid as well, you may simply view this as a stepping stone in a career. Some disciplines, some industry jobs require it, or at least it's very beneficial to have a doctor title. And certainly if you want to become an academic, even a professor, then it's a must, it's a precondition. Before we jump into what you have to do, I would like to clarify the type of work you will be doing, because there are so many misconceptions. I often find that students who just finished high school have a better understanding of what science is than people who just finished a master's degree. And that is because if you ask a high school student, what is science? They say something with controlled experiments, which is actually not wrong. While in particular engineering students at the end of a bachelor or master degree program, mostly will have learned how to engineer something, and building things is not science. You build things in support of science to evaluate, for example, a model or a theory you have to develop, but building something itself is not science. So science is when you design, develop concepts, so-called theories or knowledge, theories that help you predict the future. If we build it this way, the factory will not explode. So the science is how to build factories that do what they're supposed to do reliably in the future. So it's knowledge or theories that can predict the future accurately. And the whole point of science is how do you get to that knowledge, how do you get reliably to that knowledge, and how do you continuously test this knowledge or theories for its weaknesses. And for that, you need to learn so-called research methods, of which controlled experiments is one. You don't have to learn all, but you have to learn some, because in the course of doctoral research, you will be answering a research question, and you can only properly answer it if you used appropriate research methods. If you're curious what that is, if it's for you or just weird, you can learn about it, for example, by coming to our course called Nailing Your Thesis, How to Perform Research. And within 5 ECTS, it will give you a good idea of what science and research really is about. In terms of intellectual satisfaction, On a wholly different level, science today is teamwork. It is clearly social. For all practical purposes, you can only achieve things in a team. So as you think forward to maybe I should be getting a doctoral degree, you'll also have to think about work context. Will you be working in a team? Will it be enjoyable? And that, of course, is a practical aspect, since you might be spending years of your life on this topic. You should like the context. So science means hopefully also having nice colleagues, enjoying what you're doing. Work is a big part of life. And then, in order to demonstrate progress or as the output, you write that dissertation. Here, an example on the right of the screen. But on the way to it, you write so-called papers, which is just a weird slang term, scientific slang for research article, a journal article that you write. And you typically write a couple of those. Usually in engineering, it's probably 3. But this is the tangible result of the work you do along the way, and also the satisfaction, because this is where you put your foot down and say, this is the scientific progress I want to achieve. And you document it in research articles, and in the end, with a dissertation, where a research article is 10 to 20 pages and a dissertation is 200 pages. And again, it should be fun. At the end, you will be wearing, at least in Germany for fun, this hat in the top right corner. Actually, we do not give them out in Germany. In Anglo-Saxon countries, it's actually serious or desired or required. In Germany, it's just fun to be hatted with a doctor hat. It's just an informal customs here. So, as you wonder, is that for me? You should be talking to people. You certainly should be evaluating, since you will need a professor. Is that someone you like? Is their team some involved people you like, and so forth? So you wonder in the end, nevertheless, how do I get there if I want the title? So let me talk about the process of getting to a doctor title. And it is really crucially important, and here's the biggest misconception somehow people have. The overall doctoral process completely separates research that is worth awarding a doctor title for, and how you fund your living as you labor maybe for years on that topic. And these two things cleanly and clearly need to be separate. So let me go over that. So the basic process has some preconditions. In Germany, the preconditions are pretty straightforward. You need to have a master's degree. In Anglo-Saxon countries, you may have heard how to go from a bachelor into a Ph.D. program. In Germany, that is pretty much unheard of. I don't think, maybe there's one university somewhere, but certainly not at FAU. Can you go from a bachelor to a PhD? You always have to have a master's in between. Think of the master's, if you know the British or the Anglo-Saxon system, think of the master's as the quals, the qualifying exams that qualify you for doctoral level research. So you need to have a master's, and then with appropriate credit points, and then you can possibly start doctoral studies. You may have wondered why I don't say PhD all the time. Well, the general term is doctoral studies, and the term PhD is just a very specific variant in that space of how you can get to the doctor title. Because in Germany, the title again is DR period, not PhD, usually at least not. So the most common form, the by far most common form of getting a doctor title in Germany is the so-called individual doctorate, where you perform research under the guidance of a professor, but the research itself and its presentation needs to be done by you. And that's it. No program, nothing. The professor will say, I want this person as a doctoral student, and she will sign some piece of paper that you carry to the dean's office to be lifted into the status of doctoral student, but that's it. no money, no funding. Just you have a student status as a doctoral student now. And that's 80-90% of all doctoral students and studies in Germany, I would guess. There are some specialized programs, and since many of you are doing a master's degree right now, something like that, there are specialized programs. One variant is the graduate school, which are, again, specialized programs on a topic. So at FAU, we have the Advanced Optics Graduate School. So if you are into advanced optics, then there is a particular way of where you apply to become a doctoral student, and you'll be evaluated, and then they will say yes or no. But that is really just on this very specific topic. If you're into something different, then probably there is no graduate school for you. What we don't have is a so-called Ph.D. program. That is a very Anglo-Saxon thing. A Ph.D. program is really where you apply to the school rather than talk to an individual professor, and which has a structured program behind it, sometimes even with courses that teach you research methods, as I mentioned earlier, things like that. But also, this doesn't say anything about funding. It just says people think you're probably capable of getting a doctoral title. I say PhD program for this particular structured variant of achieving a doctorate title because it comes from the Anglo-Saxon context, they will actually give you a title of PhD, but not here. No? So all of getting accepted for doctoral studies means is that a professor, at least one, sometimes a group, thinks you can probably do the research that will be worth awarding the title, and one of them is at least willing to supervise you, and that's it. Again, no funding applied. So now you have 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of performing research and submitting a dissertation. So that's what you do. You get accepted as a doctoral student, and you will pick a research project. Maybe you had one in mind already, and that research project comes with a research question, and you apply research methods to solve the problem. And if you're good, you get results. You publish those results as scientific articles, papers, and at the end, you have not just 1 or 2 or 3, you have 3 papers, but at the end you also write a dissertation on your overall research work. At some universities, not at FAU, at some universities you can just take your papers and clip them together. Here you have to write your own comprehensive dissertation. As you do that, you do it in a team. So again, hopefully you will have, if you decide on this way, hopefully you will have fun with teammates. You'll engage in a scientific community, so hopefully you'll get to go to some conferences, meet other researchers working on related topics, and enjoy the lifestyle of a scientist. At the end, again, you have to write and submit that dissertation, and that will start, as you submit it, the actual promotion process. So after you did all that work and you got incremental validation of your work by publishing articles, you write that dissertation in the end, you submit it to the dean's office, and then there's the promotion process, not really relevant at the beginning of your studies, where you go through that process, present your work comprehensively, not just individual articles, present your work comprehensively, defend it, as they say, in front of a committee, which will then say, thumbs up, that was good work, and this person passed with a certain grade, and now we will award you the title of a doctor or maybe PhD. So here's an example. This is Anne. Anne is a postdoc in my group. Her research topic was, her research question was, why do people contribute to open source? You could be spending your time on pushing pallets at Aldi, earning some money, but no, people spend free time they have on working on other people's projects. Why? That was what motivated her. She wanted to know. We got money for it from a public funder, the DFG, a very common funder in Germany. And so not only could I accept her as a Ph.D. student initially, and later as a postdoc, but I could also pay her a living wage. We'll get to that in a bit. She had to apply selected research methods commensurate of fitting her research question, and she developed a fabulous dissertation. She wrote a fabulous dissertation. She even switched schools in between and went to Ireland for a couple of years, all of which led to a total of 6 years, which you may think is long, but maybe not. And for her was probably the right choice, because it gave her the chance for what is now becoming an academic career. The international exposure, the follow-on work, the small research papers recently gave her a new job at University of Calgary as an assistant professor. So she took this time to do high-quality research, which gave her the option of now being an assistant professor, and hopefully she will have a fabulous career. Here's another example. This is Nick. Nick wants to have an industry career. His research question was, how do companies who sell your software products or products in general, how do they embed open source software? As you use all these free open source components, you depend on them, but you're not paying them, so they could be doing whatever they want, and you don't want people to randomly change components you rely on because maybe your product will stop working. So this topic was of high industry relevance, so we had multiple companies actually sponsoring or paying for his research. In this case, the funds went to university, so I acquired those funds and then paid Nick the regular salary out of it. He applied appropriate research methods. He was very eager to be fast, so he finished in 3 years, but actually stayed on as a postdoc for an additional year, because 3 years while he finished was rather short, and he had lots of materials that still needed publishing. So the 1 year now since his dissertation defense in 2019, he spent on writing research papers and making sure that all the effort leads to tangible results in the form of said papers. Nick also got good education in parallel to just having a job here, as well as doing doctoral level research. Specifically noteworthy is the Software Campus initiative of the German government, which is for future IT managers, leaders of IT. Nick got into that program, and it got him education from German companies on leadership, on managing people. So something that clearly enhanced his time here, his education. was only possible because I acquired those projects actually for all of FAU. So then I said you really need to separate doing the research from how you pay your bills. Funding your doctoral studies can be done in different ways. The most common one is actually that the professor who says, I'll supervise you, you'll be my doctoral student, that this professor also has the funds to employ you. However, really, be very clear in your mind. The status of being a doctoral student here and being an employee of the university are two entirely separate things. You can be a doctoral student and not be an employee. You can be an employee and not be a doctoral student. It comes together virtuously, because then you're probably paid on a research project that helps you doing doctoral research, but it's not guaranteed. So, nevertheless, most people combine it, and many professors, in particular in engineering, are well funded, so they are always looking for capable people for the projects they acquired funds to, and then ideally these projects have research content. So Anne's DFG funds were clearly funds for research. I promised the DFG that we will do this project here, and so I hired her as an employee to carry out the project. And using the research results from that project, Anne performed and wrote research papers and wrote a dissertation. If the project that a professor acquires funds for is pushing pallets at Aldi, which they shouldn't obviously, there will be no research here. So as you talk to professors, be very inquisitive about the actual project that you are being paid from. It's almost always time limited. And if there's actually sufficient research content. If not, you may have a problem of turning the work you're paid for into viable doctoral research quality. Beyond that, it's actually quite lucrative compared to other countries. In Germany, if you get funding from the university, by the university employing you, it gives you a TVL E13 salary. In computer science, where I'm from, it's usually 100%, and that's a very nice salary with a monthly between 4,000 and 5,000 euro salary. That's much, much better than in Anglo-Saxon countries, where at best you get a stipend, and that's it. You don't have to find a professor to pay you. You can also work in industry, or if you're independently wealthy, just pay for it yourself out of savings. But then, given that doctoral studies, the research takes years, you need quite some staying power here. Working in industry and getting a Ph.D., a question I'm commonly asked, is very hard, because your employer doesn't care about you getting that doctor title. They want you to do some work. And if that work that looked like it was going in the direction of your research just takes another direction suddenly, your employer doesn't care whether that ruins your consistency of research. So you might be out of luck if you work in industry. Here's another one. This is Georg, who is a current current doctoral student with clearly an engineering topic, how to integrate microservices. That's a novel architectural concepts for software, and he has combined industry and public funding and also applies the appropriate research methods. Please note, he's spending a significant amount of time of his work, of his time on programming, building systems. But the research content is actually the concepts behind the systems he builds and the evaluation of the systems he builds towards certain quality criteria. The research is in the concepts that he does. Georg has another perspective on his career. He is considering being an entrepreneur. That is something I particularly care about. We have lots of research projects where the research content is focused on technology innovation, so that we can turn the results and the work of my doctoral students into software for a startup. And that's what Georg is interested in. Georg is also in the software campus program. He's also getting a good education as a future IT manager, working on his leadership skills and so forth. Ask your professor whether they can make that possible for you. Here's Julia. Julia has also only started last year. She has a research question about software systems requirements, how to do them better, combine public industry funding. She takes a design science approach, so the idea of constructing something is even more strongly in her work, even though she does a lot of programming too. And she also is in the software campus program because she's also considering an industry career, but in her case it's kind of open. And that's completely fine, because being a doctoral student also means for many it might be your first experience after a master's degree, so your first job is being employed by the university for research work. you should use that to also evaluate who you really are and what you want to do. So that's that. So let me go over some final questions here. I think these are the career prospects that work for a PhD. You need it probably if you want to be a scientist. Doesn't stop you from going in industry. It's still a well-established and liked title, so you can go into industry. Nothing hinders that. If you have the appropriate professor, you may also move over into entrepreneurship with a substantial technology already, so nothing flimsy that you hacked together in the final hours of your master's. No, you're talking about serious work of a team over multiple years, and that's much more easy to get funding for. Or, well, during the course of your doctoral studies, you'll actually only figure out what you want by finding a professor where you get to see research, but maybe also work with industry, experience that, or talk to your entrepreneurial colleagues. I will go over these questions very quickly now, maybe a bit longer in the actual online in-person session we'll do in 2 days. So time it takes is 3 to 6 years. It depends on how speedy you want to be and how scientific you want to be, so where do you want to go afterwards. How to find time to focus on a dissertation is hard if the funding you have, the project the professor employs you on, assuming you're funded by the university, just keeps changing or is not well aligned with your research topic. Remember, that's why I emphasize the job that pays your bills is not the same as being a doctoral student with a research topic. So if it's neatly aligned, for example, because it's DFG funding, which is specifically for research, then it's easy. If it's do consulting for 5 different companies in a row, you may have a problem creating something coherent out of it that warrants a dissertation and the title. How to get into a program cannot be answered in general. Look at the program description. You can certainly work in industry and create a dissertation on the side, but it's very hard. Again, you work in industry, that's how you fund yourself, but what you need for the doctor title is the research you're doing. So if your industry work is really neatly aligned, like with a professor, perfect. If it's changing course all the time and working in industry has that property of changing course all the time, then it may not be as easy. If you work for a professor, they may ask you to do teaching. They may not ask you to do teaching. That simply depends on how you're funded. The corona crisis has not changed much. If anything, it got better, I would argue, because there's even more funding for positions out there. And those positions you find by looking for advertisements here at FAU, on Univis, or on the websites of professors, or you listen to the lectures, etc. Here's my group. We've been growing. We are looking for new doctoral students for whom there will also be 100% funding. So let us know if you're interested. Our website shows some of our research topics. What I'm hiring on right now is how open source foundations work, how to make open data easy, reliable, and safe for everyone to use for innovative stuff. And also I care about the complexity of open source distributions. But this keeps changing based on the projects that we acquire. So that's me. Shoot me an email if you have questions after this talk. And so with that, I would like to finish. Thank you very much for your interest and attention.